The morning was torn open by sound, the sharp clash of metal, the screech of airport speakers announcing a delayed flight, then sudden silence, as if the entire terminal had stopped breathing. At Gate B14 of New York's JFK Airport, where hundreds of passengers waited for Northwind Airlines, Flight 218 to San Francisco, one man stood still amid the rush, his eyes fixed beyond the fogged glass. No one knew that only a few hours later, his name would make the entire country stop. Jordan Ellis, 46 years old, wore a simple navy blazer and carried a worn leather briefcase. He looked like any ordinary office worker. White shirt, light brown shoes, no luxury watch, no visible brand. Only one thing stood out his eyes, too calm, too deep, like a storm waiting beneath still water. The gate opened, the scanner beeped steadily. Jordan stepped forward and handed over his boarding pass seat to a first-class window side. The attendant smiled, unaware that the man before her was the founder of Northwind Airlines, the company she worked for. Jordan boarded, not to relax, but to observe another anonymous inspection flight, something he did every quarter, to see if the dream he built a sky for everyone was still alive. He placed his briefcase in the overhead bin. The cabin was quiet. Businessmen, lawyers, a few familiar faces. No one paid attention to the unassuming black man among the polished steel and leather seats. Yet Jordan could feel it, those fleeting glances, that brief pause of silence. He'd lived long enough to know what that silence meant. The briefcase in his hand had followed him through 3 decades, from cheap commuter flights when he was just an aeronautical engineer, to the day he signed the contract that bought Northwind's first old aircraft. The faded initials J.E. still marked the leather, standing for just enough. The words that once carried him through the impossible just enough faith to begin. Jordan took his seat by the window. The runway shimmered with morning light planes, gliding in line like dreams being pushed into the sky. He smiled softly. If his mother were still alive, she would be proud. She used to clean floors in this very airport, pausing by the glass each night, to whisper, "Just once I want to fly." She never got that chance. Jordan had promised that if he ever had the power, he'd make the sky open for everyone, no matter their skin, their wallet, or where they came from. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, Sir Ashley Carter." The first-class flight attendant stood before him. She looked about 32, blonde hair, tied neatly, her uniform crisp and perfect, the very image of company standards. She smiled, the kind of smile born from training, not warmth. Her eyes lingered on Jordan, slid away, then returned a pause too brief to notice, but too long to be innocent. "Are you sure this is your seat, sir?" Her voice was polite, but the metal in it clinked faintly beneath the tone. Jordan looked up, calm as ever. "Yes, seat 2. "All first class," he said, handing her the ticket. Ashley glanced at it, barely reading, and smiled again, thinner this time. "There might be a mistake. First-class seats are quite expensive. You might be more comfortable in the main cabin." The air shifted. 2 men behind him looked up from their magazines, pretending to read, but listening. A woman stopped scrolling her phone. Those looks weren't curiosity. They were judgments, wrapped in manners. Jordan stayed still. Inside that familiar chill rose the quiet sting of being doubted, not for what you've done, but for what you are. He'd felt it in banks, in boardrooms at charity galas. And each time he learned one thing: anger proves them right. Calmness makes them question themselves. "Thank you," he said evenly, "but I'm sure there's no mistake." Ashley pressed her lips together and walked away. Jordan opened his phone and typed a note. "Observation, first-class attendant, Didn't verify ticket, assumed incorrect passenger. The doors closed. The stream of people slowed. The cabin quieted, the sound of seatbelts clicked softly. Jordan closed his eyes, thinking back to Northwind's early days. 2 aging planes, short domestic routes, passengers who had never believed they'd ever fly. He remembered telling his first team, "We don't sell tickets. We sell dignity in the sky." But this morning, that dignity was being tested aboard his own airline. Ashley returned this time with another attendant, Jessica Morales, about 35, tall, sharp-eyed. They exchanged a glance of silent understanding. Jessica asked, "Is there a problem here?" "Ashley, just helping this gentleman find his correct seat," Ashley replied. Both women looked at Jordan, their stares like a door closing in his face. The air in the cabin grew heavier, as if pressurizing before takeoff tension waiting to explode. An older white passenger, in seat 1B, Walter Green, dropped his briefcase. Ashley hurried over immediately, her tone melting into silk. "Let me help you, Mr. Green. Was your flight from Boston smooth today?" Walter smiled warmly. "Thank you, Ashley. Northwind's crew is always wonderful." Watching that, Jordan's hand tightened slightly around the handle of his briefcase. Not anger, but disappointment, the kind that comes from seeing your own dream warped by the hands meant to protect it. Outside sunlight flashed against the wings like 1,000 mirrors reflecting the truth a company can print equality above all on every advertisement. But one wrong glance can shatter it all. Jordan tilted his head toward the blue horizon and whispered, "Mama, today I'm flying, but not to chase the clouds. It was the quiet before the storm, the calm that hides the coming wind. A flight that seemed ordinary, but within minutes it would redefine what human dignity meant in the skies of America." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin began to change. It was no longer the quiet of passengers preparing to fly, but the silence that smelled of gunpowder, the kind that comes just before an impact. Jordan could feel it, the same chill that rushes in when an airplane door opens in the middle of winter. Ashley and Jessica stood near row 2, exchanging glances like a coded signal. They didn't need to speak. Both knew they were handling a situation. The only problem was that situation was a person. "May I see an additional form of identification?" Ashley asked, her voice sweet but cold as steel beneath the sugar. Jordan opened his eyes slowly, his gaze calm and still as a lake. "Why do you need my ID just for verification?" she replied. "Sometimes there are mistakes or well-seat upgrades that weren't properly authorized." The word upgrade left her mouth like a small knife. A few passengers turned to look. Some smirked, others simply exchanged knowing glances that said, "This happens all the time." Jordan said nothing. He handed over his ticket, then gently flipped open his ID card. Jordan Ellis. Ticket purchased directly through Northwind Priority. Ashley held the ticket between 2 fingers, scanning it like a barcode. It seems valid, but the system might have a glitch. She smiled, her eyes no longer pretending to be kind. "Do you have a payment receipt, or the card used for the purchase?" Jessica, standing beside her, nodded in support of that show of authority. "Right, sometimes people buy through questionable agencies, so we just need to double-check." The phrase "people like that" dropped heavily onto the cabin floor. Some white passengers nearby cleared their throats and turned away, pretending to look at their phones as if avoiding a storm that wasn't theirs. But Jordan knew silence was also a choice. He opened his wallet, pulled out his card, and said evenly, "Here it is. Though I'm quite certain this isn't standard procedure. Is it?" Ashley hesitated for half a second, then smiled. Sometimes it's necessary, you know, for everyone's safety. That phrase, for everyone's safety, the universal shield for every discriminatory act in customer service. Jordan had heard it 1,000 times. At banks, in hotels, in boardrooms, whenever someone wanted to hide behind the words, "We're just following procedure." He quietly opened the Notes app on his phone and typed first-class attendant requests on the spot credit card verification, not covered in any company policy. In his mind, the map of the problem was forming. This wasn't about 2 rogue attendants. This was about a culture gone wrong, something he had once sworn would never take root in Northwind. A soft noise came from a few rows back. Dr. Leonard Brooks, a retired physician with silver hair and ticket number 4B, was struggling with his luggage. Jessica turned immediately. "Sir, may I help you? But first, could I see your boarding pass to confirm your seat 4B?" he answered in a tired voice. Jessica frowned. "This is first class, sir. Are you sure?" A pause filled the air. Jordan watched, recognizing a scene from his own past. The old man, brown-skinned, weary-eyed, still managed to keep his voice steady. "You can check. I bought this ticket." The way Jessica looked at him made it clear her doubt wasn't about procedure, it was about color. Ashley turned back to Jordan. "Please wait here. I'll call the lead attendant to confirm." Jordan nodded slightly, but inside every cell in his body had shifted into the cold precision of an observer. This was no longer an ordinary flight. It was an honesty test for the very legacy he had built. Minutes later, Tom Reynolds appeared, a man in his early 50s, broad-shouldered voice, thick with authority. He scanned the cabin and immediately spotted the situation to be handled. "What's going on here?" he asked. Ashley spoke quickly. "This passenger seems to have some confusion about his ticket, sir. We just need to verify." Jordan replied calmly. "There's no confusion. I have a valid ticket ID and boarding confirmation." Tom let out a short laugh, the kind that came from people too sure of their power. "You understand, sometimes systems make mistakes, and we have to make sure everything's in order. We're just doing our job." The words hit Jordan like an echo. The same words a loan officer had told him years ago when rejecting the first loan that could have started his airline. "I'm just doing my job." Jordan nodded slightly, his voice low but firm. "Then I'm doing mine, documenting a direct violation of Northwind's equality policy." Tom paused, his confidence cracking. Ashley glanced over, uneasy. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Jordan enunciated clearly. "Northwind Airlines, the company I've invested in, enforces a zero-tolerance rule against discriminatory behavior. I assume you're aware of that." No one realized he was talking about his own company. Tom looked at him more closely, but saw only a black man in a simple blazer. "Are you threatening us?" Jordan smiled, cold and steady. "No, I'm giving you a chance to stop before this goes too far." The tension thickened until even the heartbeat of the cabin could be heard. A few passengers picked up their phones, pretending to check emails while discreetly turning on their cameras. Tom took a deep breath, turned aside, and muttered to Ashley, "Call security. If he refuses to move, we'll have him removed from the plane." Ashley nodded slightly. Jordan heard every word like a blade slicing through the last thread of faith he had in the system he'd built. He said nothing, just opened his messages and sent a text to his assistant, Amy Park, on flight NW218. Witnessing serious procedural violations and passenger discrimination. Intervention may be necessary. Her reply came almost instantly. Understood. Activate internal protocol. Not yet. Let them expose themselves fully. In the cabin, Tom straightened and declared in a clipped tone, Sir, we have the right to ask you to vacate your seat until verification is complete. Jordan looked at him, his voice low, but cutting through the stillness like a blade through silk. And I have the right to ask under which policy you're authorized to do that. No one answered. Sunlight blazed through the window. The engines hummed like a heartbeat speeding up. The storm was gathering in silence. Jordan leaned back, inhaling deeply. In that moment, he remembered his mother, the woman who had once been fired for not fitting the company image. She had cried, but told him, "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to speak the truth clearly enough." He opened the recorder app on his phone and placed it neatly on the armrest. "Very well," he said softly, his tone calm, yet heavy as a stone dropping into still water. "If you wish, you can explain everything into this recording." Ashley swallowed hard. Jessica looked away. Tom tightened his grip on his radio strap. A young woman in row 3 leaned toward her friend and whispered, "He looks normal enough." "Why are they doing this?" Her friend replied, "Maybe because he doesn't look like someone who belongs in first class." That offhand comment, casual and unthinking, was the rawest truth of all. Jordan didn't respond. His gaze was steady now, no longer that of a passenger, but of a leader, watching his own creation betray its founding ideals. The cabin door closed. The captain's voice came on, announcing taxi for departure. But no one knew this flight would not take off on time, because in just a few minutes, the sky would witness a different kind of landing, the downfall of prejudice, and the rise of a man who stood not to soar higher, but to bring an entire system face to face with itself. The engines hummed softly outside. The cabin door was closed, yet the aircraft had not moved. In the stillness of first class, you could hear the heavy breathing of each person. Morning light poured through the window, but inside, a storm was building. Jordan sat motionless in seat 2, eyes forward, as if looking through every suspicious gaze fixed on him. His phone kept recording the small red light blinking steadily. He knew that with one wrong word, one wrong move, the truth could be twisted, yet from this very moment, the truth would begin to rewrite itself. Tom Reynolds, the lead attendant, drew a deep breath, grasping for control. He was not accustomed to being challenged, especially by a passenger. He believed he had the authority to manage. "Sir," he said, his voice low and loaded with counterfeit authority, "if you do not cooperate, I will have to notify security. We cannot depart with a compliance issue unresolved." Jordan looked up and met his eyes. "What compliance issue exactly?" Tom faltered. Ashley and Jessica stood behind him, silent, but their eyes were sharp with suspicion, as if they were facing a troublemaker rather than a customer. "We have reason to believe your ticket may not be valid. Based on what we just need to verify, that is all." Jordan allowed a faint, almost sad smile. "And I just need to verify that at Northwind Airlines, passengers are not suspected because of a system error, but because of their color. Am I wrong?" The question fell like a stone into still water. Minds erupted, but no one dared react. An older woman in row 3, silver hair and a magazine in hand, tilted her head, her eyes wavering. A young businessman discreetly started his phone camera. The entire cabin felt locked in a moment, awaiting the first blast. Tom lost his temper, his voice rising. "I will not argue with you. If you do not comply, I will have to ask you to leave the aircraft." Jordan exhaled softly, his eyes steady, with a calm that chilled. "You do not have that right. I have paid in full. I have a valid ticket and ID. If you want me to deplane, You must state a lawful reason. Otherwise, I will remain." The air stretched taut like a string about to snap. Ashley stepped back half a pace, her eyes flicking toward the rear for cover. Jessica gripped her radio finger set on the call button. From behind came a voice, quiet yet clear. "Excuse me, but he is right." Every gaze turned to Kevin Liu, an Asian man in his mid-30s, neatly dressed, a laptop on his lap. He stood, speaking evenly. "I have flown hundreds of times. I have never seen attendants demand on-the-spot credit card checks. A valid ticket is sufficient." "He has done nothing wrong." Ashley spun around, her tone sharp as a blade. "Please sit down. This is an internal situation. It does not concern you." Kevin did not move. "An internal situation? When injustice happens right in front of me, it concerns me." His words lifted a few heads. Some passengers nodded slightly. Others looked away, fearful of being dragged into trouble. But the silence had begun to crack. Tom flushed and reached for control. "Sit down, or you will also be asked to leave the aircraft." Kevin gave a thin smile. "Are you going to ask the entire cabin to leave?" A small ripple of laughter rose from the back rows, edged with irony and relief. Tom turned and glared. Silence. This is a commercial flight, not a public forum. Jordan remained seated, the tension in his face fading. For a heartbeat, he felt something shift, the current of power beginning to reverse. He opened his phone, switched to internal messaging, and sent a line to Patrick O'Connor, Chief Operating Officer at Headquarters. "The situation has crossed the line. Activate Protocol 7. Send Legal Public Relations and Investigation to Gate B14. Media is forming." In less than a minute, the reply flashed. "Received. Emergency team en route. Caution, passenger video is being live-streamed." Jordan glanced across the cabin. Indeed, at least 3 phones were recording. One was streaming live. The viewer count ticked higher by the second. Ashley stepped back and whispered to Tom, "We should stop. They are all recording." "The more they record, the clearer our need for security," he snapped. Tom keyed his radio. "This is Reynolds. Requesting support in first class. Passenger refusing to comply." Static crackled. Then silence. An invisible static of a different kind spread through the cabin. Jordan closed his eyes. He was not afraid. He was simply sad. Sad because he had believed that if you built enough value, trained enough, people hearts would change. He had believed an equality policy would be enough to bind prejudice to the ground. Yet here inside, the very thing he had created, bias, was lifting off as if it had never been chained. The radio crackled again. "Copy. Security en route." Every eye swung to the cabin door. The air grew thick. Kevin sat, but turned to Jordan with a steadying look. "Do not worry. I have everything on video. They cannot deny it." Jordan smiled so small, only he could hear it in his breath. "No need to deny. The truth speaks for itself." Tom stepped closer, looming beside his seat, his words clipped. "You should do the right thing. Leave before you make this worse." Jordan opened his eyes. There was no anger in them, no fear, only a light that looked almost like pity. "The right thing. You may be correct, but I believe the right thing is not to leave it, is to stay." One line and the air froze. Tom stepped back half a pace. Jordan lifted his phone, his voice steady and clear. "For the record, I am Jordan Ellis, passenger, in seat 2A on Northwind Airlines, flight NW218, being asked to leave the aircraft without any lawful reason." Ashley drew a sharp breath and glanced around. Every phone was pointed at them. A young passenger in row 5 whispered, "He is brave." The person beside them replied softly, "No, he knows he is right." Outside, the blue uniforms of airport security edged into view beyond the cabin door. A few passengers lowered their phones, but most held them steady. They knew they were witnessing something larger than a seat dispute. Jordan typed quickly to Amy, "Prepare emergency communications." Maintain silence. Confirm only the facts. Then he set his phone down and clicked his seatbelt. Tom frowned. "What are you doing?" "Preparing for takeoff," Jordan answered evenly. "You're not going anywhere." "No, and none of you should fly before you look in the mirror." The words landed slowly and heavy like engines about to ignite. A passenger in the last row began to cry softly. No one knew whether it was fear or feeling. Jordan felt only one thing, destiny drawing near. He looked out the window. Another north wind jet lifted into the sky, its shadow sketched against deep blue. He murmured, just for himself, "Mama, perhaps today the sky will relearn the meaning of the word fairness." Then he turned back to Tom and spoke with the voice of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. "You can call security. You can delay this entire flight, but you cannot delay the truth. And the truth is that you are discriminating on the very airline built to confront it." Tom opened his mouth to speak, but the moment overtook him. A chime sounded the alert tone of an urgent internal message. Ashley's screen lit up alert. "Chief Executive Officer Jordan Ellis on board NW218. All crew stand by. Await command." She froze her face, draining of color. Tom stared at the screen, his lips trembling. CCEO Jordan raised his head, his gaze bright as steel, catching light. "Now do you understand why I am not leaving my seat?" First class fell silent. Outside, the engines kept their steady roar like the heartbeat of a world about to witness the moment when truth detonates. First class on Northwind flight, W218, fell into absolute silence. There were no more pleasantries, no more glossy small talk of luxury service. Only the tiny sounds of tight breathing, the steady hum of the engines outside, and the shocked eyes of people who had just realized they had touched what should never be touched. Ashley Carter felt her heart drop into her stomach. The words, "CEO Jordan Ellis on board NW218" on the internal crew display, read like a verdict. She glanced at Tom Reynolds, the man who had held his chin high moments ago, now frozen like a statue. Is he really the CEO, Ashley?" whispered her voice, trembling. Tom did not answer. He only looked toward Jordan, the man still seated, hand resting lightly on a worn leather briefcase, his gaze so calm it was frightening. A few passengers began to murmur whispers, spreading like sparks across a dry field. Is he really the CEO? No way, I thought he was just a regular passenger. My God, did they just interrogate the owner of the airline? Jordan remained silent. He did not need to speak because the truth was speaking for itself. In that moment, the cabin door opened. Captain Miguel Alvarez appeared solidly built, the serious face of a man with thousands of hours in the sky. His eyes swept the unsettled cabin and stopped at Jordan. In an instant, he understood. Ladies and gentlemen, his deep, steady voice carried through the cabin. I need everyone to remain seated. I must speak privately with the passenger in seat 2A. Jordan stood. Not quickly, not slowly, each movement radiating a power that required no introduction. All eyes followed as he stepped into the aisle window light, cutting his face into half shadow, half sun. Miguel drew a breath and said, "Mr. Ellis, I have just received a direct notice from headquarters. They confirm you are conducting an internal inspection flight. I sincerely apologize for what has happened." A soft chorus of ohs escaped a few passengers. The rest could only stare. Jordan didn't respond. He looked at Tom, Ashley, and Jessica. 3 faces gone, white eyes, wide with confusion and shame. Ashley clenched her hands, lips quivering as if she were holding back tears. Jessica edged backward, avoiding his gaze. Tom stood rigid shoulders, locked sweat beading on his forehead. Captain Alvarez Jordan said, his voice, low, dense, edged with metal, "Are you aware that in this airline, the very people entrusted to protect our values are the ones dismantling them?" Miguel bowed his head. "I am aware, and I am sorry." Jordan turned to the cabin, addressing every passenger. "I founded Northwind on a simple principle: everyone deserves to be treated with equal respect, no matter who they are, where they sit, or how much money is in their account. But today, I witnessed the opposite here, in the first-class cabin of the very company I built." He paused. The cabin held its breath. Phone cameras clicked, dozens of passengers recording. "What just happened is not merely the fault of one person," he continued. "It is the sign of a sickness called prejudice, and it is quietly killing the trust we have built." Tom opened his mouth. "Mr. Ellis, why?" "I did not mean." Jordan raised a hand. "No explanation is needed. Intention does not erase impact. You did not simply embarrass me, you harmed this brand." No one spoke. The entire cabin had become a stage, and the Jordan was the only person standing under the light. He turned to Ashley. "What is your name?" "Ashley Carter, sir. How long have you worked at Northwind?" "Almost 7 years, sir." "Then you have read the Employee Handbook, Section 3, Article 7. Every passenger must be served with equal dignity. You remember it, do you not?" Ashley swallowed and nodded faintly. "Yes, sir." "Then why did you forget it when you saw someone whose skin looked different from most of this cabin?" Ashley dropped her head. Her voice broke. "I did not think." Jordan cut in. "Exactly. You did not think. And that is the problem. When people stop thinking, prejudice begins to act for them." No one breathed. No one dared meet his eyes. He turned to Tom, his voice lower and colder. "You are the lead attendant. Your responsibility is to protect the rules, not bend them to cover bias. You know the passengers recorded everything, correct?" Tom nodded, lips trembling. "Yes, sir." "Good. Because I want that footage to spread. I want the world to see how far we still are from what we dare call fairness." A wave of murmurs rolled through. Some began to clap softly. A woman in row 4 said under her breath, "This is the most right thing I have ever seen on a plane." Jordan drew a long breath and looked back to the captain. "I need your cooperation. These 2 attendants will not operate this flight. I want them escorted off the aircraft immediately." Miguel nodded, speaking into his radio at once. "Security prepare to enter. 2 crew members to be escorted from first class." Ashley broke down. "Please, sir. I am sorry, I did not mean." Jordan looked at her. "Not angry, only sad. You do not owe me an apology. You owe it to the people you have made feel less than worthy to sit here." Jessica stepped back, tears running. Tom gripped his radio strap with shaking hands. He managed, "Mr. Ellis, I have served Northwind for 15 years. I have never." Jordan cut him off again, his tone final. "It is precisely because you have worked 15 years and still have not learned to see people through their dignity rather than their color that you must leave today." 2 security officers entered wordless. The scene spread across social media within minutes. Live streams captured every step. Stunned stares, choked words, uniforms being led away between 2 silent rows. Jordan stood tall, the window's light on his shoulders like a quiet crown. He turned back to the cabin and spoke clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Northwind Airlines, I apologize for what you have just witnessed. This is not our image, not our culture, and certainly not the soul I want for this airline." A few people began to cry. A few stood and applauded. Kevin Liu, the first to speak up, met Jordan's eyes and nodded with respect. "Thank you for not staying silent," Jordan said, his voice low yet warm. "It is those who dare to speak, who move this world forward, an inch at a time." He paused and drew breath. "And to the rest of you, those who stayed quiet, I do not blame you. But I hope that when you see something like this again, you will not simply turn away." In the morning light reflecting through the windows, Jordan Ellis, once denied the dream of flying because of his skin, now stood in the middle of the airplane he had created, no longer a passenger, but the man making justice take off. Outside, the sun climbed higher, washing the wing in bright gold. Inside, everyone realized that some flights are not measured in miles, but in how high the human spirit can rise. The cabin door closed after the two security officers escorted Tom Reynolds and Ashley Carter off the aircraft. First class remained in absolute silence, not out of fear, but because everyone had just witnessed something rare, justice delivered among the clouds. Jordan Ellis sat down, loosened his tie, and took a deep breath. There was a faint ache in his chest, not from exhaustion, but from the truth that had surfaced inside the very place he had built on faith. Outside, sunlight filtered through the window, casting a pale golden hue across his face. He said nothing for several minutes, just stared quietly at the widening sky ahead, where a new flight for Northwind was about to begin, one powered not just by engines but by courage. Captain Miguel Alvarez approached, removed his cap and bowed his head slightly. His voice carried honest regret. "Mr. Ellis, I'm sorry for not being here sooner. If I had known, I would have intervened immediately." Jordan looked at him, his gaze free of blame. "It's all right, Miguel. I know you're a good man. But today isn't about who's good or bad. It's about how long we've allowed silence to linger." Miguel said nothing. He understood. Deep down, he too had turned away from injustice before telling himself, "It's not my place." But today, watching his own CEO humiliated, he realized that silence could be a form of complicity. Jordan stood, stepped into the aisle and looked at the passengers, a faint smile on his lips, though his eyes carried the weight of reflection. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know what you've just seen wasn't pleasant. It wasn't for me either. But I believe no real change ever begins with comfort." He paused, his tone firm and clear. "We talk about equality in advertisements, in speeches, in campaigns. But true equality only means something when it's tested in uncomfortable moments, when you have to choose between staying silent or speaking up." In the back row, Kevin Liu nodded. The young man who had recorded everything now lowered his phone, his expression full of respect. "Mr. Ellis," he said, "I think today you didn't just save Northwind's reputation, you restored faith for people like me." Jordan smiled softly. "No, Kevin. I simply did what each of us should always do, hold on to our dignity, even when others try to take it away." A wave of applause rose gentle at first, then spreading until it filled the cabin. The air felt cleaner. A white woman in row 4, hands trembling, spoke up. "I'm ashamed for staying silent when they treated him that way. I'm so sorry." Jordan met her eyes, kind and steady. "It's all right. What matters is that you recognize it." We've all been silent at some point. But if today you decide not to be silent next time, then the world is already better. At the back of the plane, a young woman live-streaming wiped her tears. On her phone screen, the words flashed, #Skyline. Justice CEO discriminated against on his own airline. The viewer count climbed every second. Across social media, Kevin's video and the live stream spread like wildfire. Amid the commotion, Jordan's phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Amy Park, Mr. Ellis, the news is exploding. CNN, BBC, and the New York Times have reached out. The entire board is watching live. Jordan exhaled slowly. He knew the situation had outgrown this flight. It had become a question of ethics of corporate culture and of what leadership truly costs. He turned to the captain. "Miguel, I want this flight to continue. But before we take off, I have an announcement to make." Miguel nodded and handed him the crew microphone. Jordan walked to the front of the cabin, holding the mic. He looked across the rows of faces, some still stunned, some watching intently waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deep and warm, "my name is Jordan Ellis, CEO of Northwind Airlines. I apologize for what you've witnessed, something that never should have happened. But I don't want to apologize only with words. I want to act." He paused, looking straight into the lenses of the passengers' phones recording him. "As of this moment, I am announcing that every passenger on flight NW218 will receive a full refund and an additional $50,000 in compensation. Not because I want to buy silence, but because I want to repay trust. None of you should have had to witness discrimination, especially on an airline built from a dream of equality." The cabin erupted. Applause, gasps, and tears filled the air. One man exclaimed, "My God, I've never seen a CEO do something like this." A young woman cried, "This is what true leadership looks like." Jordan waited for the noise to settle before continuing his voice, now deeper, steadier. "But this is only the beginning. When we land, I will hold a national press conference. Northwind will fully cooperate with federal authorities to investigate the discriminatory conduct on this flight. And I promise no one in this company will stand behind the banner of equality while acting against it." Miguel watched him, admiration lighting his eyes. He understood Jordan wasn't just resolving a crisis, he was leading a cultural revolution in aviation. Jordan set the microphone down and looked around the cabin once more. Instead of sitting, he remained standing, speaking slowly, almost as if to himself. "You know, 20 years ago, I was rejected for a flight attendant interview. The reason they said I didn't fit the brand image. Today, I realize the real image of a brand isn't in skin color or uniforms, but in how we treat others when no one is watching." The cabin stayed silent. Then once more, applause rose louder, stronger, more genuine than before. Near the back, the live streaming girl spoke to her viewers through tears. "You're watching history. A CEO who doesn't hide, doesn't blame, but stands in the middle of his plane to teach the world about dignity." Jordan returned to his seat. 2A. The midday light spilled through the window, tracing the lines around his eyes, not from age but from experience. Captain Miguel's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready for takeoff. Today's flight may be short, but its meaning will travel far." The engines roared. The plane began to roll down the runway. Jordan closed his eyes, feeling the familiar vibration hum through the frame, and in his heart rose a quiet emotion, not pride, not relief, but faith. Outside Northwind Flight, NW218 lifted from the ground, leaving behind a runway glowing under the sunlight. high above it, flew not only on fuel, but on the dignity of humankind, the only force that can keep the sky truly clear. Northwind Flight NW218 had been in the air for 15 minutes, yet inside first class, no one truly they were flying. Everyone was still caught in the echo of what had just happened, the moment when justice stopped being an abstract idea and became an act before their very eyes. Jordan Ellis leaned back in his seat, eyes half closed. Beneath those lashes was a storm of emotion, relief, sorrow, and above all the pain of a father watching the child he created lose its way. Northwind was his life's dream, an airline built to erase the barriers between classes, a place where everyone who stepped through the cabin door was equal under the same sky. Yet today that very airline had become the clearest example of the opposite. He sighed. Through the small window, the endless blue stretched ahead, but he knew that even at 30,000 feet, prejudice could still travel with people. Behind him, passengers whispered. A middle-aged man murmured, "Can you believe it?" The CEO was kicked out of his seat by his own employees. The person beside him replied softly, "I've flown with Northwind for years. They always talk about equality, but look at this. Turns out it's just a slogan." Another woman joined in, but at least he stood up for himself. Who else would have done that? Her words made several people nod. The admiration in their eyes was no longer for a CEO. It was for a man who chose not to stay silent. Captain Miguel Alvarez stepped out of the cockpit and lightly tapped the side of Jordan's seat. "Mr. Ellis," he said, "Operations just sent an update. Social media is exploding. The hashtag Skyline Justice is trending #1 nationwide. Politicians, journalists, and lawyers are all commenting. The whole country is talking about Northwind." Jordan opened his eyes, his voice slightly hoarse. "I figured that would happen. Part of me wanted it to." Miguel frowned. "Wanted it? Aren't you afraid the company's reputation will collapse?" Jordan turned toward him with a weary but determined smile. "If a brand can collapse just because it tells the truth, then it deserves to. I didn't build Northwind to be liked. I built it to be respected." The captain nodded slowly. He understood. In that moment, he felt he wasn't serving a CEO. He was serving a true leader. Jordan rose from his seat and walked down the aisle quietly, looking at the faces around him, some smiling in encouragement, some still uneasy, some avoiding his eyes out of guilt for staying silent. He stopped beside Kevin Liu, the young man who had spoken up when the entire cabin stayed quiet. Kevin Jordan said warmly, "Do you know what impressed me most about today?" Kevin looked surprised. "What was it, sir? That you didn't know who I was and you still chose to stand up?" Kevin smiled modestly. "I just did what was right." "No." Jordan shook his head. "You did what was difficult. There are millions of people who know what's right, but only a few who dare to do it." Kevin looked at him, eyes full of gratitude. "You know, sir, I used to think power was what changed the world. But after watching you today, I realized true power is being willing to lose it for what's right." Jordan placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. "Remember that. And if one day you see someone else being treated unfairly, don't wait until they reveal they're a CEO." When he finished speaking, he walked back toward his seat. The air in the cabin felt lighter now, not heavy, but awake. Back in his seat, Jordan opened his phone. Hundreds of messages flooded in from the board, the legal team, the media department, even competitors. but he read only one from Amy Park. "Mr. Ellis, you've done what no one in the airline industry has dared to do. The entire country is calling you, the face of dignity and leadership. But the board requests you return to headquarters immediately after landing for an emergency meeting." Jordan smiled faintly. He didn't need to read more. He already knew that meeting would test everything between protecting values and protecting profit. Which would they choose? The flight continued, the sky below, slowly turning gold. A little girl sitting a few rows behind tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, who is that man?" Her mother smiled, eyes glistening. "He's the one teaching you that no one has the right to tell you to leave a seat you deserve to sit in." As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, will be landing in San Francisco in 10 minutes. Thank you for flying with Northwind Airlines, where everyone is welcome." The closing line made everyone smile. It sounded familiar, but today it felt truer than ever. Jordan looked through the window and saw the runway coming into view. He thought back to the early days when he and a few friends sat in an old garage writing Northwind's first pledge, "No one gets left behind." He whispered softly, "It's time to rewrite that pledge in action, not ink." The aircraft touched down. The vibration made everyone exhale in relief. But for Jordan, it wasn't an ending. He knew the real battle had only begun. When the cabin door opened, dozens of reporters were already waiting by the jet bridge. Flashlights burst, voices shouted over one another. "Mr. Ellis, were you really discriminated against? How will Northwind respond? Are you planning to sue your own company?" Jordan stepped into the blinding lights calm as ever. He raised his hand for silence. "I'm not here to be a victim," he said, his voice carrying across the terminal. "I'm here to correct a mistake that I allowed to happen." Behind him, passengers exited as well. Many stopped to shake his hand. An elderly woman said, "Thank you for showing us that there are still good people in power." Jordan replied simply, "I didn't show anything. I just did what my mother would have done if she were sitting in this seat." A black company car awaited to take him to headquarters. As the door closed, Jordan looked through the glass and saw the reflection of the plane's lights on the tarmac. He murmured softly, almost to himself, "Some flights take us far away, but others take us back to who we are." The car rolled away. Behind him, passengers were still talking phones, still live streaming, and the story of Jordan Ellis had left the airplane, soaring into the hearts of millions. On the radio, the anchor's voice broke through. "Breaking news, the CEO of Northwind Airlines was discriminated against by his own staff on one of his flights. The video has reached 10 million views in 1 hour. The story is shaking the nation and reigniting the debate on equality and ethics in business." Jordan sat quietly, eyes fixed on the window. The airport lights faded behind him. He knew that from this moment on the sky would no longer be just a place where people fly, but where justice must learn to take flight too. The Northwind Airlines headquarters in downtown San Francisco gleamed under the late afternoon sun. The glass towers reflected a sky painted in shades of red and orange, where the sunset slowly swallowed the last clouds of the day. Inside the conference room, on the 48th floor, 12 board members were already seated, each wearing the same practiced calm, the kind of calm that only comes from people who are worried, but trying not to show it. At the center of the room, the CEO's chair remained empty. Then the door opened, and Jordan Ellis walked in. The lights caught the trace of exhaustion across his face, yet his eyes still shone the eyes of a man who had walked through a storm and never lost his direction. No one spoke as he sat down, No introductions, no formalities. The emergency meeting of Northwind Airlines began in silence, a silence heavy enough to feel like judgment. The first to break it was Henry Cole, the chairman of the board, a silver-haired man with black-rimmed glasses. "Jordan," he began slowly, cautiously. "First of all, on behalf of the entire board, I want to express our deep regret over what happened on this morning's flight." However, he paused, scanning the others in the room. "We need to discuss the actual damage." Jordan leaned back, arms folded, listening without interruption. Henry continued. "Northwind stock has dropped 8% in just 4 hours. Major media outlets are calling it an internal management crisis. Some advertising partners have suspended their contracts. The board needs to ask, was your decision to publicly discipline the crew mid-flight and to announce full refunds plus compensation to every passenger an impulsive act?" Jordan met his eyes. "Impulsive," he repeated slowly, each word striking like a hammer. "If fairness is called impulsive, then maybe we've grown too comfortable with injustice." A wave of murmurs rippled across the room. The chief financial officer, Marissa Lee, spoke up. "Jordan, I respect your ideals, but $50,000 per passenger is a massive payout. We're talking nearly $3 million, not including the upcoming media and legal costs. You're trying to save moral value, but we have to protect shareholder value." Jordan leaned forward, his voice low but resonant. "Marissa, stock prices can recover. Moral value once lost cannot be charted back." The room went still. Someone exhaled quietly. Someone else tapped their fingers on the table. Jordan stood, picked up the remote, and switched on the large screen behind him. A video appeared the first-class cabin from that morning. Ashley asking if he was sure about his seat. Tom calling for security. Kevin Liu standing up in protest. Jordan's calm voice echoed through the speakers. "The right thing isn't to leave. It's to stay." The image froze the room. Henry removed his glasses, staring at the screen. Marissa lowered her head, pressing her lips together. Jordan turned off the display. "This," he said evenly, "is what's spreading across the world. And I'm not ashamed of it. Because what you just saw, that's the truth. A truth we've been hiding behind polished slogans. Dignity in every flight. But if that dignity can't survive in first class, then it means nothing on a billboard." The head of human resources spoke nervously. "Are you saying our entire training system has failed?" "No," Jordan replied. "I'm saying our system never truly began. We taught employees how to smile, but not how to see others without bias. We trained them in customer service, but never in human dignity." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room. "I built Northwind to prove the sky could be a fair place. But today that sky reflected the opposite. The problem isn't 2 flight attendants, it's us. All of us." Silence. Then Henry sighed. "So what do you propose, Jordan? We can't just apologize and keep flying as if nothing happened." Jordan's eyes lit with quiet fire. "No, we're going to fly differently." He picked up a marker and wrote on the whiteboard. Number 1. Northwind Equality Fund, a $2 million fund from my personal assets to support victims of discrimination in the transportations industry. Number 2. Mandatory bias training. Every employee from flight attendants to senior executives must complete unconscious bias training. Fail to complete no work authorization. Number 3. Anonymous reporting system. Passengers and employees can report discrimination through an independent third-party channel. Number 4. Public accountability. We will publish transparent quarterly updates on all reform progress, including our mistakes." He turned back to them, his tone firm. "This is not a public relations plan. This is an apology in action." Marissa wasn't done. But what if shareholders object? What if the media magnifies this incident and we lose millions more? Jordan looked at her unwavering. Better to lose money doing what's right than make money pretending to. Our shareholders deserve to know this company runs not only on fuel but on integrity. Henry rested his chin on his hand, studying Jordan for a long moment, then smiled wearily. "You know, Jordan, I used to doubt you, but today I see the founder. I remember the man who walked in with a torn briefcase and a dream to bring everyone under one sky." Jordan replied softly, "That dream is still alive, Henry. It just needs to be cleaned off." No one spoke after that. Outside, the sunset faded, giving way to a night that stretched over the city. The lights of aircraft blinked beyond the window, each one like a spark of hope. Jordan sat down, opened his laptop and drafted an email titled, "To all Northwind employees, we fly different tomorrow." In the message he wrote, "I don't want you to be just airline staff. I want you to be guardians of our passengers' dignity. If anyone makes you feel like you don't belong, remember you still have the sky. And no one owns the sky but us." He pressed send. The soft click echoed lightly like a breath of wind, but it was enough to ripple through every floor of the building, through every inbox and through the hearts of tens of thousands of Northwind employees around the world. As he left the boardroom, the city lights shimmered across the glass walls. Henry called out behind him, "Jordan, I don't know where this will take the company, but I believe whatever the outcome we just did, the right thing." Jordan turned back with a faint smile. "Not me, Henry. Us. And from today, Northwind won't just be an airline. It will be a reminder to the world that fairness can still fly." He stepped into the hallway. His reflection in the glass showed a man weary but proud. Outside, a Northwind plane lifted into the night sky, its trail of light stretching like a bridge between past and future. For the first time in years, Jordan felt at peace, because he knew tonight the sky wasn't just higher, it was clearer. San Francisco woke up to a cold wind that morning. The clouds hung low, as if the sky itself was reflecting on what had happened. On the 72nd floor of Northwind's headquarters, Jordan Ellis had arrived early. The pale light of dawn spilled through the tall glass windows, casting a soft glow on the walnut desk, where he sat a lone man facing the rising tide of public opinion below. The screen in front of him blinked endlessly with notifications, emails, news headlines, comments, messages of support, and words of criticism. One headline stood out: "Northwind CEO turns first class into a court of morality." Just below it, another line carried a more skeptical tone: "Justice or publicity stunt, investors divided over Jordan Ellis." Jordan read them all slowly, without judgment. He knew every true revolution began with doubt. The price of truth was always high, and those who spoke it were often misunderstood before they were understood. The door opened softly. Amy Park, his assistant, entered carrying a stack of folders and 2 cups of coffee. She stood quietly for a moment before speaking gently. "Mr. Ellis, this morning, we've received more than 600,000 emails from passengers and viewers around the world. Half of them are thank you letters. The other half are stories from people who've experienced the same thing." Jordan looked up. 600,000, he repeated, his voice faint. Amy nodded. "Would you like to hear? A few?" Jordan nodded again. She opened the folder pulled out a printed letter and read slowly. I'm Linda Torres, 58 years old, an elementary school teacher from Texas. Last year I was asked to leave first class because the crew thought I couldn't afford the seat. I stayed quiet because I didn't want trouble. But when I saw you stand up, I cried. Thank you for speaking for people like me. Amy paused, her voice catching slightly. And this one is from a child. My name is Aiden. I'm 9 years old. I saw your video on YouTube. I told my mum that one day I want to be a pilot so everyone can sit wherever they choose. Jordan fell silent. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let those two stories sink deep. Amy, he said softly, you know, sometimes one video can change more than any policy ever could. Amy nodded gently. You're inspiring the world, Jordan. But there are people who want to use this against you. This morning, a group of major shareholders called for an emergency meeting. They say you acted emotionally and caused serious financial losses. Jordan smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried exhaustion beneath it. They have that right. But let them come. I have something to say not about profit, but about principle. 2 hours later, the ground floor auditorium was packed. Shareholders, investors, and journalists filled every seat. Cameras, flashes, and microphones all pointed at the podium where Jordan stood. But he looked calm, steady in a white shirt without a tie, his posture upright, his eyes clear. Thank you for coming, he began. I know the past few days have not been easy. Northwind stands at the center of a global debate, and I'm not here to avoid it. Nor will I apologize for doing what was right. Camera shutters clicked in rapid bursts. An older male shareholder stood abruptly, his tone sharp. Mr. Ellis, you've caused the company's stock to drop nearly 10%, costing us tens of millions of dollars. How do you plan to take responsibility for that? Jordan nodded. I understand. But let me ask you this. If we do nothing, if bias and discrimination are allowed to exist within our system, then what is Northwind worth? Stock price or honor? The man opened his mouth to reply, but Jordan continued, his voice growing stronger. Money can be earned back. Reputation cannot. I would rather lose a few $1 million today than lose the trust of millions of passengers tomorrow. The room fell silent. A journalist in the front row whispered to a colleague, He's not talking like a CEO. He's talking like someone trying to save the soul of aviation. Jordan looked across the crowd, his voice now softer, deeper, resonating. I was once a child sitting outside an airport fence, watching planes take off, dreaming of flying. My mother used to clean those same terminals, dreaming of sitting in first class just once. She never got that chance. But I swore if I ever built an airline of my own, no one would ever be asked whether they belong in a seat. Behind him, Amy wiped away a tear. Around the room, a few people bowed their heads. Others set their pens down, no longer taking notes, they just listened. Jordan continued. Northwind isn't just an airline. It's a belief that human dignity doesn't come in seat classes. And yesterday I had to choose protect the brand through silence or protect humanity through action. I chose action. He paused, then looked directly at the shareholders. And if any of you believe that was a mistake, I am ready to step down as CEO today. But I will not step away from the ideals that started this journey. The room went completely still. No one spoke. No one dared. After a long moment, Henry Cole, chairman of the board, rose to his feet, his eyes resolute. No one here wants you to resign, Jordan. I've worked with you for 20 years. And today I remember why we believed in Northwind in the first place. We don't just sell tickets, we sell trust. Applause erupted, slow at first, then spreading, growing louder until it echoed through the room like engines preparing for takeoff. Jordan bowed slightly, gratitude shining in his eyes. He spoke quietly, almost like a whisper. Thank you, everyone. From this day forward, Northwind will not fly only on engines, but on the hearts of those who believe fairness can exist even in the sky. That evening, Jordan left headquarters. The wind was strong, carrying the scent of salt from the San Francisco Bay. He stopped at the terrace on the ground floor, looking up at the night sky. Northwind planes glided overhead, their lights streaking across the dark, like words written in light. His phone buzzed. A message from Amy. Mr. Ellis' other airlines are announcing plans to follow Northwind's reform model. It looks like we've started a movement. Jordan smiled. He lifted his gaze to a plane, rising into the deep sky, its lights blinking against the stars. In that look there was no anger, no hurt, only the calm of someone who had done what was right, even if the world wasn't ready for it. He spoke softly, almost as a promise to the heavens. No one can make us leave the place we deserve to stand. And sometimes that place is right in the middle of the sky. Somewhere above, a Northwind jet crossed through the clouds, its silver wings reflecting the moonlight. No one knew where it was headed, but everyone could feel it from this day on. It was flying on justice. 3 days after the incident on flight NW218, the world was still in shock. From early morning, major news channels replayed the same footage over and over. Jordan Ellis standing in the middle of first class, his voice calm and steady as he said, "The right thing isn't to leave, it's to stay." That sentence became the most quoted line of the year. People began calling it the sky effect. The effect of the sky. On social media, the hashtag #FlyWithDignity flooded every platform. Thousands of passengers posted photos of themselves on planes with the caption, "I belong here." Competing airlines announced internal reforms and bias awareness programs. In just 72 hours, Northwind had gone from the center of controversy to a global symbol of corporate ethics. Inside Northwind's headquarters, something had shifted. Employees smiled more, spoke more. And when serving passengers, they looked them directly in the eyes. Procedures turned back into people. In his office, Jordan watched the news. On screen was 9-year-old Aiden, speaking at a school assembly, saying he wanted to be a pilot so everyone could sit wherever they chose. Jordan smiled softly. "That's the future," he murmured. Amy entered carrying the morning paper. On the front page, the headline read, "Northwind, the airline that taught the world respect." She set it down and said, half-jokingly, "You just pulled this company out of a crisis without a single PR campaign." Jordan replied quietly, "That's because I wasn't trying to do PR. I was just telling the truth." A moment later, the phone rang. It was Henry Cole from the executive office. "Jordan, I just got a call from the White House. They want to invite you to speak at next month's global conference on business ethics. The topic dignity at 30,000 feet. Jordan chuckled, his tone calm and humble. "I'm not sure I'm a hero, Henry. I'm just someone who didn't want to sit still." That afternoon, he visited Northwind's training center. New posters lined the hallways, each one reading "Respect Takes Flight." In one classroom, dozens of flight attendants and staff sat in a session titled "Unconscious Bias and Humanity in Service." When Jordan entered, everyone stood. A young trainee raised a hand. "Mr. Ellis, may I ask what kept you so calm in that cabin? Jordan paused, his expression softening. Calm doesn't mean I wasn't angry, he said. It means I understood that if I reacted with anger, that's all they would remember, the anger, not the reason behind it. Sometimes, to prove your dignity, you must choose to be calmer than the injustice itself. The room fell silent, then broke into applause. Jordan smiled, looking around, his voice warm and steady like a promise. Remember this, you are not just service staff. You represent the value we believe in, that everyone who boards a plane carries the same right to be respected. And if one day you forget that, remember Flight NW218. Not because of the scandal, but because it reminds us that fairness only lives when someone is brave enough to hold it. When Jordan left the center, he stopped by the glass window overlooking the sky. A north wind. A350 lifted into the air, its reflection gliding across the shimmering bay. He whispered, "Mama, I kept my promise." His phone buzzed. A message from Amy appeared. CNN just announced Northwind has entered the top 10 most trusted brands in America. The whole world is talking about you, Jordan. He looked at the screen, shook his head, and smiled. No, Amy, they're not talking about me. They're talking about us, about how people can change when they remember that dignity doesn't require a first-class ticket. The sunset poured across the horizon. The airplane grew smaller in the sky, leaving behind a long streak of light, a shining reminder that from this day forward, Northwind would not just fly through the skies, but on the wings of faith in humanity. 1 month later, New York shimmered in lights. Inside the Grand Hall of the United Nations, the Global Conference on Business Ethics was being broadcast live to more than 60 countries. Hundreds of leaders, journalists, and students filled the room. At the center of the stage hung a bold banner that read, "Dignity at 30,000 feet." Jordan Ellis stepped onto the podium, his posture calm, his eyes as deep as the sky he had once fought to make clear again. Applause filled the hall, then gradually faded. He began to speak, his voice slow, steady, and powerful. Exactly 1 month ago, I was sitting in Sit 2A on Northwind Flight, NW218. At that moment, I was not a CEO. I was just an ordinary passenger, a man asked to leave his seat because someone believed I did not belong there. The hall fell completely silent. Jordan continued, each word carving itself into the hearts of his listeners. In that moment, I realized fairness does not begin in speeches. It begins in the way one person looks at another. And it ends there, too, when we stop seeing each other through the lens of bias. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience. Faces leaned forward, pens stopped moving, and a few people quietly wiped their tears. Northwind has changed, he said, but not through a marketing campaign. We changed by relearning how to see, by teaching that dignity has no seat class. Today you may sit in a position of power, but tomorrow you could be the one judged for being different. That is why fairness is not a privilege, it is a responsibility. Applause erupted. Jordan bowed his head slightly in gratitude, then spoke softly. And if my story means anything, it is only this. Never let your silence become the accomplice of injustice. He ended his speech with emotion filling his voice. When they try to make you leave the place where you belong, remember the sky has no barriers. It belongs to those who dare to hold their dignity. After the ceremony, Jordan stepped outside. New York sparkled under the night, the wind whispering through the skyscrapers, like the sound of a world beginning to change. In the distance, a Northwind aircraft rose into the clouds, its lights flickering through the mist. He stopped to watch. Beside him, Amy smiled. You know, they just named our new charity foundation, the Sky Fund. Hundreds of people signed up as volunteers today. Jordan looked at her, his expression soft. It's not my foundation, Amy. It belongs to everyone who was once told to leave and chose to keep flying. He lifted his gaze to the vast black sky, his voice deep and warm like a promise. There are storms we cannot avoid. But if we fly high enough, we'll see, above the clouds, the sky is always blue. The Northwind plane disappeared into the distance, leaving a trail of light like a comma in a story not yet finished. But for Jordan Ellis, that flight had already landed, not just in the history of aviation, but in the hearts of those who still believe that fairness can take flight every day, everywhere. From the perspective of a leadership ethics expert, the journey of Jordan Ellis proves that true power does not lie in position, but in how a person chooses to keep their dignity when it is tested. If you believe that fairness can take flight, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment the phrase, "Hold your dignity."